Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10. Yes, 10, we've made it to double digits of Genre Blender, the podcast that celebrates all things storytelling. My name is Kris.
And I'm Ryan, and the topic for this episode is the aspiring author. Finally, a writing episode.
Have we done a writing episode yet? I can't remember.
I don't think so.
I
Have
think
we?
this, I don't know. Let's say this is our first one, and
If we
if we're
have,
wrong, people can let us know.
we're probably wrong.
Yeah.
We're usually wrong. I think we've talked about writing a little bit, especially yours, but like not focused on it. So yeah, long time coming. Before we jump on in and talk about writing, anything you've been reading or watching or playing this fortnight?
Yeah, I actually picked up a crime thriller at the recommendation of a couple of people that I'd done a podcast with before. It's called Mystic River by Dennis Lehane, and I don't gravitate towards crime thrillers very often. I find a lot of the time they're very formulaic. You sort of get to the end, you have the reveal, and you're like, well, I'm never reading that again, and pop it down. But apparently these books were really, really good, so I ended up ordering a couple of secondhand. I picked it up, and I really enjoyed it. So if we go with star ratings, not a lot of people love star ratings in my circles, but for me, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5.
Oh wow.
Just because the writing was so compelling, even though it's written in a way where you know what's happening as the reader, but the people in the book don't really know what's happening, or at least you think you do, until the end. But I found it really good, and I will pick up another Dennis Lehane book. I'm not gravitating towards the next one because it's not a genre that I love, but it was good enough that I'll read another one before I perish, hopefully. And I'm also reading The Advent of Winter, which is a indie self-pub anthology that came out I think it was the year before, but it was designed for last year to read a story a day. So it's 24 stories, you read one every day over December, and that is your advent calendar. And it's all
Nice.
the only prompts the authors were given was fantasy aspects, winter, go for your life. And there have been some really cool short fiction pieces in this anthology so far, so I'm looking forward to today's because it's one of my favorite author discoveries of this year. So
That's
that'll
a
be
really
good.
neat idea. That's super
Yeah, it was
cool.
very cool. Anyone who's watching can see the naked hardback behind me. I've got it on the desk here, ready to go for straight after this episode.
Nice.
In terms of watching and playing, I really haven't done a lot, to be completely honest. I played a couple of hours of Chef RPG again just for that sort of comfort feeling. Work's been nuts, but I've gone back to my roots with watching, and I've watched a lot of BookTube over the last 2 weeks to, I guess, get back into one of my goals next year. Is I enjoy BookTube as a consumer. I haven't been doing that a lot this year, and to try and find new people. So I think that's, talking about Willow Talks Books, that really sparked that, desire to go and find people who are talking about things that maybe I'm not reading. Unfortunately for the TBR, that means it will crumble under the pressure of next year. But yeah, I've really been enjoying BookTube recently.
Good. Yeah, that's good. Actually, I want to. I'll probably pick your brain after this at some point, or maybe for next year. I want to sort of get your recommendation on some BookTube channels a little bit more than what I have been watching. I've been sort of, when you kind of want to rest your brain, so you kind of just do
Yeah.
you do things without having to think about stuff. And I've been going to all the street photography videos and watching those. But it's like I could be watching videos about books, and I probably should. So I might ask for your
It's a
recommendations
slippery
afterwards.
slope into your wallet. So recommend
That's the
it.
downside.
Yeah. What about you? What
Yeah,
have you been
that's cool.
reading, playing, watching?
Yeah, a little bit reading, a bit of all three. So I'm still, I've got. I thought I would finish it before the episode. I've got one short story left of Night Shift, and I'm
Oh
halfway
yeah.
through it. So, but it's interesting because this one was a bit of a slog to get through. I will say, it's
I
just
can't
super
remember it.
dated.
I don't know if I've read
Yeah,
Night Shift.
it's just there's probably a good 20 something short
Hmm.
stories in there. There's quite a few. But I've been ranking them because I got this idea from what was the channel, Hardcore Literature, I think. The host of the channel told a story. This is one from ages ago, of the author Kurt Vonnegut. He did a writing class back in the day, and he would teach his students, and he would say, he would assign them a short story anthology. I don't know what one it is. I don't think it's in print anymore. And he'd tell them to read the stories and then to rank them, because I guess his point was to make everyone have, or let everyone know that you should have a favorite, and you should know why that's your favorite and what is it that speaks to you, that kind of thing. So I've kind of been thinking about it in that way, and I might start doing that with all the short story anthologies that I read.
I think I do that
But
naturally. Like I
yeah,
I've done it with this. I've read what we had the eighth. I've read seven so far. I've definitely gone, yeah, this is my favorite. This is the ones that
you got to
haven't really
rank.
worked for me. Yeah, yeah. Just naturally in
Yeah,
my head.
absolutely.
Maybe it's a list
Yep.
maker thing. Where you
Yeah,
naturally
maybe.
gravitate towards the lists.
That's it. Yeah, I'll probably do that rather than rate. I don't really rate things, but I will absolutely rank things. But yeah, it's just, look, it's super tropey. I'm glad it's over with. I'm looking forward to reading The Stand, actually, which I'll probably I kind of speak too soon because I know what's coming for me with that story. But that's okay. I'm looking forward to that. So that's what I've been reading. That's pretty much it. Oh, I did start Hitchhikers, but I'll talk about that probably next time when I've finished it. I've also watched I was going to say short film. It's not a short film. It's a full feature film. An independent film with Elliot Page, starring Elliot Page, but also produced by and directed by Dominic Savage, called Close to You. And it's basically about. I'll read the synopsis. The synopsis is a trans man revisits his hometown, facing family tensions. He reconnects with an old flame, rediscovering himself. His journey leads to self-acceptance and newfound strength. This one was. I didn't know this was even being made, honestly, and then I think Elliot Page posted on Instagram or something, and talked about it. It was a while ago, and so yeah, that came out and. It was good. It was kind of like two stories in one, really. So you've kind of got like this family story where he's going home and he's having to talk to his family again after not having seen them for like 5 years and like pre-transition, and all the tensions that apply with that. But that was good. That was really authentic. I really liked that story. And then you've got the love story on top of that as well, which I mostly liked and had some issues with, but it was mostly good. But it was just a very simple story, but it was great. And there was there's the music in it just got to me. When you watch a movie and you're fine and then the music comes in and then you just like start sobbing because it's like that's what gets to you. That's what it was for me. There's this piano theme that comes in.
And
Yeah.
did you rate it as a trans person watching trans films? I was saying to Ryan before we started the podcast that I tend to not watch these things until I'm in a good headspace because I feel like stories like this where it hits very close to home can put me in a dysphoria sort of spiral, and I'm not ready for it. But how did you feel as a trans person watching the story unfold?
Yeah, well, I went into it prepared, so it was fine. It was mostly fine. It wasn't really a sad story. It's complex. It was a complex story, and it's authentic, and it's authentically told, and I liked that. But it wasn't anything surprising, and it wasn't anything I wasn't prepared for. So I enjoyed it for that because I knew what I was getting into. And it's not like it was a feel-good movie, but it had feel-good aspects to it, I guess. It's an interesting story. Yeah, very simple, but just like authentic is the best word I've got for it.
And also complex at the same time, which can be the case in trans people's lives. So I'm glad it was authentic.
Simple and complex.
And I guess I feel similarly to this, the way that I feel about the memoir that to Page Boy, and that I'm glad it is out there for people to watch and experience. Whether it works for me, I don't know. I can't say that.
Yeah, that's it. It's something to. I mean, maybe when you're in the right headspace and you're thinking, oh, I might try it. It's probably worth watching then. What I will say actually is something that is pretty rare. Its depiction of people with disabilities as just people who happen to have disabilities, not focused on their disabilities. I don't really remember seeing that. And I'll talk about Dragon Age in a minute, but it was also in Dragon Age, and that's interesting, and I feel like that's something that is emerging a bit more with in storytelling. But that was really good, and that was noticeable. It kind of stood out to me,
I like that though, because I feel like people are just people, and we need to stop
Exactly.
worrying about what other people are doing, and feeling the need to comment on it as a society.
Yeah,
That's another
100%.
episode, I'm sure, at some point. If not, we're sure we've already talked about it as well.
We'll still have to do that episode on tangents. Just like we'll compile all the tangents and do a 3-hour episode.
The amount of tangents that we go on. All right, look, I know you're dying for it. Tell me. about Veilguard. You said you were going to do a
Oof.
review.
Yes. So I said I would do a little mini, spoiler-free mini review. So I'll talk a little bit about it. I won't go. Well, I'll try not to. If I start going into the weeds, do let me know. But because I don't really like, I don't review games or anything really. So this is kind of my opportunity to do that. So I thought I'd talk a bit about it. I will also post a link in the show notes for. I did a little like a threads on Blue Sky and on Threads, just a little post series about it as well, and the ending especially for anyone who's actually finished the game primarily. But this one will be spoiler free, so you don't have to worry about spoilers. But yeah, I put in about 115-ish hours, so it's a fair
It's a
chunk over
decent
about
amount
3 weeks.
of time. Over three
Yeah,
weeks.
that's it.
Damn.
Over 3 weeks. I mean, usually I was actually surprised at how long it took me to get through it, and it wasn't for lack of actually putting time in to play it. Like I did actually, I was consistently playing it. I just did all the side quests and explored and all the stuff that you actually want to do in a game. So I saw that as a good sign. Also, actually, before I dive into it, there is recently an AMA on Reddit with the developers of Dragon Age of Veilguard. So there's a lot of stuff I haven't, or like I'm starting to read there that's sort of been unveiled.
I see what you did
Pun
there.
intended.
Yeah. All right.
So yeah, there's lots of information sort of emerging that I'm not up to date with. But look, it was I loved the game. I enjoyed spending the time playing it. Obviously, you wouldn't put 100 and odd hours into a game if you didn't like it. Do I think it's the best Dragon Age game? No, but also in parts, yes. The last 5 or so hours might have been some of the best in the series to date, in my opinion. Those last few hours were just cinematic, great storytelling. Where the story went was fantastic. It was surprising. It had those emotional punches. It went in twists and turns you wouldn't really expect. Like you would expect something, but you weren't sure what to expect. So it kind of surprised me a lot. And it built up to that as well. So it sort of it had the payoff in the end. But it was also very clear that this is a game that had a pretty complicated and challenging development cycle because of how many times it's been restarted, and it was going to be a multiplayer game at one point, and you can kind of tell that the faction system in the game, you can absolutely tell that it was kind of meant for something like that. So there's a lot of things that don't quite make sense. Some of the art style inconsistencies are kind of, they pull you out of the game a little bit. I did like the art style. A lot of people don't, but I really did. But look, to be honest, what I liked the most from it was the actual story itself. I think it's a fantastic story that it's telling, and it really dips into a lot of the lore, and there's some big moments. And if you are a Dragon Age fan, I think it's like the people that are dismissing it outright, because there's a lot of for the people in the know, there's a lot of behind the scenes, people kind of bagging on the game a lot, critiquing it a lot unnecessarily for its wokeness and all of this stuff as well. So there's all of that going on. But I think you're probably doing yourself a disservice if you're a Dragon Age fan and you're ignoring or skipping this one, because there's a lot of lore that gets unveiled with this one. But yeah, loved the art style, loved the cinematography of these big set pieces. Combat I actually really enjoyed, was fun. I have one big criticism. Did you want to say something first before I jump into that?
No, Rachel is playing it very slowly. She's quite busy with work at the moment, but
Yeah.
she's like talking to me. Like if I'm in the same room, sort of reading or doing anything with her, usually it's building nano blocks. She's like, "Oh, this is this from this game," and like she's trying to talk about the lore. And I'm like, "I have zero concept, but I'm glad
Yeah.
you're excited." Like, so she's done it a
Yeah.
few times.
Absolutely. Look, if this was a book, and there are books, but like, if the game was actually a book, I think you'd really love it. Like it's that kind of a story.
Well, I do have one of the Dragon Ages, maybe the first two, on my Steam, but I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever pick them
They're
up. I
commitments.
tried Mass Effect, and it wasn't for me. Sorry, Mass Effect
Hurt my
fans.
heart.
But yeah, like because Dragon Age is more, I guess, fantasy focused. I'm like, I may enjoy that one more. But we'll see. Sorry. Anyway, your criticism.
Yeah.
Carry
No, no.
on.
If you ever have the time to spare to put into the games, absolutely you would like them. But yeah, they are commitments for sure. But like, yes, I really enjoyed it. I guess so. My biggest criticism of it is that it feels like there should have been more of those moments, like the payoff that we got at the end, that was fantastic. Loved those, the last few hours. There should have been more of those throughout the whole game, and it felt a little bit like, I don't know, there was a bit of that emptiness feeling. And this is why I mentioned my post that I did on Threads and Blue Sky, because I talk about the ending and how I felt about the ending of Mass Effect and how that affected me, and has stuck with me. And while I loved Veilguard's ending, I'll probably forget about it because it wasn't there throughout the whole game, you know. So I feel like it was, again, this game. It's just the fact that it even exists is a miracle, really, because it could have. It's been like 10 years. It could have very well just not come out at all. So I'm happy that it exists. I had a bunch of great moments with it. I love the time spent, but you could also tell. So it was, there's pros and cons to it. But yeah, I think anyone who's skipping it just because they're like, reviews aren't good, that's a mistake. I think you should absolutely play it because there's definitely some good in it.
We should definitely do an episode of reviews. I'm going to check our notes to see if they help or hinder things.
Mm.
I feel every time Ryan and I sit together and we do one of these podcasts, I'm sure people have realized now that we're like, oh, there's something we could talk about, and add to the list of things we want to talk about
Constantly. Yeah,
it's interesting because I did read your, not to harp on too much about this before we jump into the main topic, but I did read your threads sort of, I guess, comparison between Veilguard and Mass Effect, and it's really interesting to me, I guess the memories and the associations that you create as you're growing up with Mass Effect that you played, I think it was 15 years ago, compared to this one here, and I guess just how hard hitting those are and how much nostalgia plays into it as well.
yeah.
And I guess there was a huge time gap between these two games. I quite like the thread. It's well worth a look if you're interested, even if you're not a gamer, because I haven't played any of these games, but I enjoyed the comparisons and I guess not the criticism so much, but I guess the deep dive between the two that you did.
Mm-hmm.
So check out that link
Yeah.
Down below if you're curious at all.
Next episode, I'll probably talk a little bit about, hopefully, if I finish it, Life is Strange, Double Exposure, which I still need to finish.
I thought you were going to say Hades 2, because that's just recently
No,
released.
Has it come out?
It sure has.
Oh,
I don't think it's on Switch. I don't know if you're
okay.
playing it on Steam. But I recently looked at the first one because I love the art style. And I love that hack and slash sort of fast-paced gameplay, but I still haven't bit the bullet yet.
Oh wow, yeah. Hades is the first one. I never I sort of finished it and kind of can't really finish the game, but kind of did and loved it. But it's not my typical kind of game, so I kind of need to be in the right frame of mind to play it. But it's good for short gaming sessions if that's your jam. You'd probably dig it quite a bit.
That's exactly what I'm here for.
Mm-hmm. Is there multiplayer in this new one, or it's just?
I don't know. I was just thinking that. I was like, I wonder if there's a multiplayer aspect to this one. That'd be interesting. Yeah.
Check it out. All right, shall we get into the meat and potatoes?
Yeah, let's jump into it. Let's actually talk about the topic. There is a topic.
All right.
It's the aspiring author. We will talk about it.
Indeed. Well, would you like to kick things off with this discussion? What's top of mind for you?
I think Ryan and I have been talking for a long time. We both sort of write in our own ways, and it's obviously an interest for both of us. And I thought it'd be interesting to talk about now that I've got a book release on the horizon, self-pub, next year sometime, and talking about, I guess, what does an aspiring author, what does that phrase even mean to start off with, and do you like it? 'Cause I don't know if I do.
Not really, no.
Okay, let's delve into that first of all. So
Sure.
what does aspiring author mean to you, and why don't you like it?
Yeah, look, it's the aspiring part of
exactly,
of the
right?
aspiring. I think I mean, look, I used to, when I was younger, I would always say to people, if they asked you what do you want to do, when you're older or whatever, it's like, oh, I aspire to be an author, a published author or whatever. But I think, I don't know, if you spend all of your time aspiring to do something, what are you doing?
Do it.
Yeah, you don't do it, right? Which is what I'm doing right now, by the way, because I'm not writing. But yeah, I think it's if you're going to be an author or a writer, and we'll get into that in a sec as well, I think you just need to do it, and you're not aspiring to do it. You don't have to be a successful, like as in like have something published or whatever, as long as you're putting in the work and doing that consistently, and that's a thing that you are spending your time doing. I think that, that's what makes you a writer or an author or whatever it is.
Very similar. I think it's that my brain gets very stuck on that aspiring
Yeah.
word. Like, are you actively working towards something? Then you're not aspiring to it. You're participating in that conversation, whether that be with
Yeah.
yourself or with other people. Like, the aspiring is just, it's like that interest versus hobby thing that we were talking about. I don't
Yeah.
know whether it was last episode. It's like, is it an interest because it's fleeting in your mind? Is something you want to do. That to me is the aspiring aspect of it. Whereas there are thousands of people out there actively working on work in progress that are, they're not aspiring. They are authors or they are writers. They are actively doing that and pursuing that. So it's just interesting. I'm glad we fall in a similar
Yeah.
wavelength on there. And on that, is there a difference for you between writing versus like being a writer versus being an author? And what is that?
Yeah, interesting too. And I'm curious if you agree with this, but at first, like when I was younger, I would always think of myself as just just, I shouldn't say just, as a writer, in the sense that I would be writing different things. So, that it might have been novels, it might have been short stories, poetry. Sometimes it might have been for non-fiction stuff, for copy stuff on the web or whatever, right? So all of that falls in that category. But I always thought to myself, I will call myself an author when I have something published. I don't agree with that anymore. Like I feel like you are, if you have authored a work, doesn't matter if it's published or not, you are an author. That's fine to say so. But I feel like for me, if I'm going to call myself an author, I want to have something at least completed, at least something I can point to and say I authored that work. That's just my own personal thing. How about you? Is that similar or
Yeah,
something completely different
quite
for you now that you actually have?
quite similar. So right
Mhm.
now I would call myself a writer because I'm writing something, and then once it is published and it's actually out in the world, I will switch that to author.
Mhm.
But I also think that that comes down to personal preference as well. Like there's a lot of
Yeah,
people out there doing blogs who are like, "Oh, I'm not an author. I'm a writer. I write
yeah,
for." Blogs. And in my mind, I'm like, well, you've published something and that is now public. So, if you wanted to call
yeah,
yourself an author, like, and then again, people are just going to define things for themselves and that's fine. We just respect what people want to define for themselves. But for me, it's
yeah.
like, I feel like I've become a better person since transitioning. I don't know. I was very snobby about the writer versus author aspect and being like, if you haven't published something, then you're not an author. Whereas nowadays, I no longer agree with that. Very similarly,
Yeah,
it's like, are you working
yeah,
towards a thing? You make your own definition. And if you want
yeah.
to be a writer versus an author, that's fine. For me, right now, I'm a writer. I've had many, many failed projects over the years. There's been some direct plagiarism, which we'll get into with like the first things that I ever wrote. Um, which is just funny, like things that you do as a kid and you tell yourself you're original. Like, nah, bro. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
and I'd be curious if the people who are listening, if you're working on something, where do you draw that line for yourself? So leave us a comment on wherever. I think we
Yeah,
can put comments on a few of these places that we're on. Yeah, let me know because I think that'd be interesting to start a conversation around where do you draw the line there? Um,
yeah.
I don't know if I went on a tangent or a bit of a ramble, but
No, I think you didn't actually.
yeah,
For once.
for the first time that we've done that. So I want to sort of
Yeah.
ask because we've worked on very different projects and we have. So Ryan and I, we've talked about this before, have very similar interests, but in different sort of, I guess, areas of those interests. So where you've written things before, it's one of those hobbies that comes up for you occasionally where you'll like hyper focus and like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm enjoying right now. When did the writing bugs, when did it start for you? And do you have like a first project that you can remember that we can explore and delve
Oh yeah,
into?
absolutely. I don't think we've even discussed
No,
this. Maybe I
I
think.
don't know if we have.
I don't know if we have. Um, and I don't know if I've kind of told half of this story before. I think on maybe the first episode when we were like introducing ourselves. Maybe not sure. It's a while ago. So so when I used to live in a smaller town, like 600 k's from Perth, and there wasn't a lot to do, right? So like you kind of make your own fun, I guess. So I got really into like sci-fi TV shows. So I would basically I would hire or rent out, VHS tapes from the video store in like, five at a time in a big stack, and I'd come home with them and I'd watch them back to back. And most of that would be like, Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, whatever. We had a house where we could like close off the doors, and so I'd just like turn off all the lights, close the doors. I'm in my own little room, and push my chair right up into the TV and have my own little cinema experience. That's a firm memory in my head. But because of that, because I was watching like all of these sci-fi shows, so Star Trek, there was like X-Files, it was Sliders, Farscape, all the 90s and early 2000s sci-fi shows. Torchwood was in there, Firefly, Fringe. All of those. So when I was like really into that at that point in my life, I was writing a lot of fan fiction, I guess. And I
There it
think you
is.
might relate to this. There it is.
I've never
Who hasn't?
I've
Right,
never
come on.
fan fictioned. I've never written fan
Really?
fiction, and I don't think I've read any.
Well,
I read Fifty Shades of Grey. Does that count? The first one. Now, that was an experience that I never want to repeat.
all right. We are doing we're going to do a challenge episode. We're going to get Chris to write a fan fiction.
About what?
Drop in the comments what you think he should write about.
Huh? I'll do
Well, I'm
it.
going to
Don't
get you
think I
writing some fan
won't.
fiction.
Wait,
Yeah,
I only think
I'm
about
scared.
fan fiction as being incredibly smutty. Am I wrong in that?
I mean, mine wasn't, so that does exist, but like, it's
Challenge,
hard to find.
challenge on the challenge. I'll write smutty fan fiction, and it won't be good. And then I'll read it live for you.
Okay, hey, you said that. I'm gonna pull that quote, and you said that.
My cheeks will go so red, like my whole face will be the same color as my cheeks.
That's going on the gram. That one. Oh, okay. Yeah. Look, so that was my first entry into writing, but also I guess look even before that, sixth grade. I had the most awesome teacher, Miss Webster. I don't know if she's still around. But because like she was so cool, she'd let us do our own thing if we finished the work early and stuff. So I would just like write. If I'd finished my work, I would just like start writing, and I wrote like it was like a science fiction. It was probably a big rip off of Star Trek, to be honest. And
We've
it
all
was
done that.
original in my mind. Yeah, yeah. And I don't know what happened to that because I did keep it around when I was like in my early 20s. I did still have that story. I don't even know how long it was. It wasn't novel length, but I think in my mind I thought it was novel length. So yeah, that was really my foray into writing, just because I was so into all my sci-fi
That's
shows.
so cute. I also thought mine was novel length. It was like 3.5 pages.
Oh,
That was
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. That's it. Right, essays longer than that now. How about you? I'm curious because yeah, because we haven't talked about it, so I'm curious.
For as long as I can remember. Like, that thing that people, like, even the trans thing wasn't as long as I can remember. I only really, like, I hit me like a freight train. But the writing thing, my earliest memories, I can remember wanting to be an author, to wanting to create stories. And I guess when I started to have those memories, and I always was the kid that I would go to bed on time. Mum, if you're listening and you tell me otherwise, I'll believe you because my memory's pretty fuzzy. But I would like go to bed on time. I wouldn't fight bedtime very much, but I would be creating stories and I'd be creating scenarios in my head of maybe things that I'd seen that day that I wanted to happen in my in my own life. It didn't matter. And that story that I created in my head, or that dramatization of life, would continue. So I would go to bed and like do the next episode in my head, and it
Nice.
would be like a
Yeah.
serial, and then that story would end naturally. Like I was writing soap operas in my head for like so. That is the only thing I can attribute it to, is like this shit went on for
Nice.
years, and then even like when I got into my teen years and my early adulthood, I would go to bed and I would be thinking about stories about people. But I remember like the first project that I ever did was probably a direct copy of Lemony Snicket's The Series of Unfortunate Events. Like the
Oh
writing
wow.
style, there was a fire involved. It was just like basically just copy paste, and I thought I was original and amazing. But I also used to love playing solo. Like I would play school because I was a cool guy. And I would either be I would play the English teacher who would give like the story concept to the children, and then I would also play the children who was writing the story. So it'd just be me in my room writing stories. Were they good?
Amazing.
Absolutely not. I remember my ex had on the back
That's a
of
good
her
point.
door one of my very early works about crabs, and it was like a little poem about crabs, and I have no idea what it was. All I know is a terrible drawing of a crab Pokemon on it, and it was like I remember nothing about it except it was about crabs.
That's a very specific thing to to
I don't
tell
know
a
where I pulled it
story.
from, but it was there. And then, and as I got angsty, I started
Amazing.
writing poetry. I feel like we've all,
Absolutely.
every teenager on this
Had a poetry
planet
phase.
has written dark, depressing poetry.
Absolutely.
I read one to Rachel at our
I
wedding. Not the dark, depressing stuff, but I wrote her a love
wow.
poem. Like, I embarrassed her
Oh,
with
that's
the love poem at the wedding. Um,
that is the sweetest thing.
it's so
Wow.
bad. I can try to say something. Hopefully, I don't know if the mic picked it up. Didn't
I
hear
heard something.
it.
That was a confirmation. Amazing. That's really cool. Yeah, I think we've all done our poetry phase. I actually I did get into poetry quite a bit when I was older and then at uni as well, but I don't know, I don't have the patience for poetry, I don't think.
I love it. I love prose. Like
Yeah.
as a even in novels, and I just think that verse, telling a story in verse, I've really got to give you Calypso. The next time, oh, Ryan and I are going to see each other in real life next weekend. We've got to get a photo for our Instagram
We
to
probably
prove that
should
we
do
do
that.
see
We've
each
had a
other
few
in real
opportunities
life. We
and
just
yeah.
don't. Um, but yeah, like the concept of telling a story in verse is like I don't have the talent to do it, but
Yeah.
the imagery that can be evoked from poetry, this is a tangent, is just amazing. Using so few words to have something so visual like smack you in the face is very cool. I was never
Yeah,
that good.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, well, I have a couple that I am proud of and then that's about it. Yeah.
There will be one
Um
at the end of
I
my book as an appendice item.
oh,
To
really?
yes, so I wrote my grandfather a poem before he passed away about how much confidence he gave me the day that he shook my hand, as opposed to giving me a hug. And because this story is all about my transition, it will be the appendice at the end of the book. And I
That's
gave it
amazing.
to him a couple of months before he passed away.
Oh wow.
He gave me a hug then. I was like, that's ironic.
I think that
Yeah.
warranted it, to be honest, though. Did you have any particular projects then, or did it come later for the like when you were actually writing? Like, was it
I
a recent thing when you said I'm going to actually do that now, or did you kind of bit by bit kind of
I actually
just write?
don't know what it was that made me pull the trigger. And like the
Mm,
transition was a huge catalyst for me for many reasons. And having that journey of this is who I am rather than this is who I want to be. And it comes back to that word aspiring. And I feel like I was always aspiring for something. And it wasn't until I figured out that I was trans and I was in the wrong body and like my whole life just made sense all of a sudden that I sort of went, oh, no, I can do this because this is who I am. And it really sort of opened up the possibility of doing that. And I remember, I've always wanted to tell stories. I've had a couple of failed projects, like I said, come off the ground. Um, Not the last house we were in, but the house before that. I started putting down essays, just personal essays about transition, sort of chronologically, the experiences that I had as someone who transitioned older and also just who doesn't give a shit about a lot of that stuff. Which is funny because I said that, movies like Close to You or whatever it was can put me in a dysphoric spiral. But
yeah,
a lot of things just, I don't get dysphoric about a lot of things. It's more societal to me than the way that my body looks and how I'm perceived. So I was writing these experiences down, and Rachel and I had some very difficult conversations as adults and doing this older, and it just sort of never went anywhere. And like, I don't know whether I will ever publicize those. Like, if I do a personal blog, maybe that's where I'll put them. Um, and then I started another story, very sort of Forgotten Realms esque, and I realized that the novella I was writing was way too big. And it was not going to be what I anticipated. So I still have that story, and I may revisit it. But that is like I'm thinking like sprawling 30 book series was what I was aiming for. I was like, probably not where to start with this. But I got, I think,
Shit.
24,000 words of that done, and then I started a novella, which was actually the introduction novella. I got like 7,000 words into that. Um, and just to bring it back to transition, I remember being on the floor writing, like scribbling madly on a post-it note about these aspects of this story that I wanted to write. And it's probably about the time that I started testosterone. I'd been going through this journey for 12 months or so. And I was like, this would be cool in a fictionalized setting. And I want to write my transition in this way so that people who are reading it aren't going to know that this is what it's about, but also the people who are in my pack are going to pick up on the things that have happened, like the body hair and the changes and how no, how everyone's different and we're perceived differently in the world. Um, and I was going through my dev edit notes today. There's actually a part where I call someone calls themselves a freak in it, and the dev editor was like, "This is, it's a very harsh language. Are you sure you want to put it in there?" And I'm like, "Yes, because we can feel so ostracized, and it is a heavy word. That is the point of that word being in there, is because I want our people to go into this going, I'm not, and come out of that book being like, I'm not a freak. I'm just a person who I'm meant to be. So I think that really did trigger the desire to write this story, and then I ruminated on it. I've been on T for what, 5 or 6 years now, um, and it just felt like the time was right when I started being more confident and stopped giving a shit what people were thinking and talking about behind their backs. I'm like, this is the time now. And then I wrote it over 12 months. The first draft took about 12 months, and now we're at the next stages, which is way longer than 12 months. I didn't realize that at the time.
Yeah, that's it. And then, yeah, the editing takes that's a whole process, right? So
It's,
it
sure
can be pretty
is.
long.
It sure
Yeah,
is.
very cool. Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because I think what you're getting at here is that you had a catalyst for this, right? Like there was something that your transition in particular was the catalyst to kind of maybe even that like the internal permission piece that you kind of
Yeah,
give yourself, like I
it's a good
now
way to
am
put it.
an authority on this, on this
Yeah.
topic, therefore I can now talk about it and share my experiences. And I feel like for me, it's pretty much the opposite. For some reason, after since starting to transition, I haven't really written, and I don't know why, because it seems like a perfect opportunity. So I'm glad you've had that, because absolutely, that's it's a great time, it's a great reason to do that and pour yourself into a story like that, to share.
I think that permission piece is a really good point. And, I didn't have the words for it, but you gave me permission, ironically, to use the word then. Because I now had the bug. Like I now can see future series and future thematics that I want to put into series. Like, I'll finish this one. I won't do that thing where I start a bunch of series and not it won't be like my reading. And,
So you say,
so yeah,
your words, I'll quote you. Yeah.
directly after this, I plan on jumping into book two and writing book two. There will be a gap between books one and book two, but now I have another series that I want to write, and a very, I guess maybe to be arbitrary to some people, reason that I want to write this next series. But it's like, okay, I've got the bug now, and now I'm actively putting it into my budget, which is probably something that we can talk about, the costs associated with doing this, because I never expect to make the same money, and I never expect to make the same emotional feeling that I'm getting from doing this than that I'm putting into it, and that's okay. Like I'm very much at peace with that. Um, yeah, it's I don't see myself stopping at any point now that I've started. It's
Good.
just like Pringles, once you pop.
I think that might be trademarked. Don't tell anyone.
That's why I didn't
Yeah,
finish it.
I agree. Yeah,
We don't want a copyright. Can
that's it.
you imagine if we got a copyright
Yeah.
infringement?
Oh
It's,
man.
huh?
It's not like we make any
Yeah,
money on
yeah.
this anyway. Well, I'm glad to hear it, because absolutely, I think, and I've yet to read your masterpiece, but at some point,
In Talk to the Dev
it's good to
editor,
have that
it's
outlet. I think.
not a masterpiece, according to everyone who's read it so far.
I think it's. I think everyone will say that.
When was the last time you really got stuck into your writing?
Uni.
Okay.
which was like
I feel
I
like
graduated 2018.
uni can really fuck with people's interests because it takes
A
them and
little bit.
it goes to the extreme.
I don't know if I would point the finger at being at uni to like I think that was helpful for my writing, to be honest. I don't know what happened. I really don't. I think just life, just transition and life, and then working full time and all of that. So it is one of those things like you mentioned before. Like for me, it has to be in. It's in seasons for me. Like if I'm in the season of my life of doing like right now, I'm really into my photography. That's kind of what's taking up all my free time. But then at some point in the future, it'll just be like all hands on deck, all just like everything jumping in with both feet for my writing. You know, so eventually it'll get back to that, and probably after Japan, maybe.
Yeah, true. Maybe the travel will inspire as well.
Hopefully,
I
we'll
love when
see.
things inspire you, but you're not expecting it to, and you're like,
Oh yeah,
"Damn, I got hit with that. Now I want to go away and do X, Y, and Z with that information or that stimulus." Just
that's it. And
had,
then that's all you can think
and that's
about.
all you can do. Yeah, I think I mean, this is sort of going back to the conversation we had last week or last time we did the podcast was that the seasonal hobbies. I think that's more common than we think. We had a comment that I responded to by a good friend of mine, um, who was just telling me to open comments on Spotify so she can talk about the sharks. But she was saying that for her also the hobbies can be all consuming. So if you're writing for that time, then that's what you're doing for that time. If you're playing Dragon Age Veilguard for that time, that is what's taking over. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a time thing for me, and that's fine. I'm good with it, but eventually there will come a time. I mean, I do have like, and we'll talk about like projects and things in a sec as well. But like, I've written 5 novels. They're sitting on my hard drive. You know, like they're just there. That was back when NaNoWriMo used to be a good thing. It's not anymore. We probably won't
We
talk
won't talk
about
about
it anymore. But
NaNoWriMo.
no, but once upon a time, it used to be a great thing, and it was good to
Were
kind
you,
of kickstart that.
were you able to do it? I don't think I'd ever be able to do it.
Yeah, yeah, five times in a row.
That's
I mean, that was
amazing.
I just used it. It was just an excuse to like, because like going back to that permissions thing, right? Like when you can actually say to someone, "Oh, sorry, I can't do that thing right now. I need to get my word count in. I need to sit down and write. I need to put my butt in my chair and just like do my writing." Maybe that was just helpful for that alone. Just for that reason that you can then give to someone to say, "Hey, this is the thing that I'm doing." I didn't find it super helpful for like good quality writing. It wasn't really about that. So it's literally just get your word count
That's
in.
that's what I often think about it because I think as a concept, it's quite helpful for some people. Not so much for myself, but for some people, very helpful. But then yeah, the quality at the end of it is. I'm curious.
Yeah. I think you've got to strike that balance. At least I do. Maybe, other people are probably quite different with how they approach it, and you will probably be different with how you approach it. But for me, I like to have at least something that's. I don't want it to just be random, just like babble on the page just because I wanted to get my words in, because I know that's not going to be helpful for me in the future. For like, editor hat on, great, now I've got to deal with this. I'd rather be thoughtful about it. So I don't mind not getting, if I'm in that mode of writing, not getting the word count in that day if the quality of the output is better. I'm okay with that. But everyone is different. So where do you stand on that?
I don't know. I feel like I'm different to all the other boys when it comes to um my process, but I'm not. I'm not unique. None of us are. But I personally, when I go to write, I do it in sprints, and that doesn't work for a lot of people. But for me, it is the only way I'll get my ass in a chair. Is I'm not great with sitting still, so the only way this book got written was I pantsed it, which I didn't think I would do because
Yeah.
I plot life. So the fact that I went in with very little planning except for loose events that I wanted to happen, and with book two, I feel like the sequels you need more plotting because you need continuity as you go through. But yeah, I would sit down. Usually, it all happened in a routine. I think we've spoken about this before, but I would sit down for 20 minutes and whatever happened in that 20 minutes happened. Now, that 20 minutes might turn into 2 hours just because I was in the zone, but because I'd sat down with the intention of being there for 20 minutes, I was able to do it. And I did it 4 days a week. I don't write every day. Um, I know when we talk about quality, to link it back to your point, is, for example, if I'm working in the office and I've got, 2.5 hours of commute time, when I get home and then I need to make dinner, if I sit down to write after that, the words are not going to be quality because my brain's no longer in it. I naturally switch
Yeah.
off at about 8 o'clock at night. So if I'm sitting down to write at 8 o'clock at night, that's going to be drivel and I'll just
Yeah.
have to edit it the next day. Whereas if I were to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, I might be able to sit down for an hour and get something quality out. But yeah, I think it's important to, I guess, understand your own routines, what works for
Yeah.
you, and be okay that that is not going to work for everyone else. When I hear people
Yeah.
giving advice that leans more towards the you should, that's not advice. You're telling someone what to do, and it doesn't work for that person. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
The only you should find out what
you
works for
should
you
find out
and
what
do
works
that.
for you and do that
Yeah.
because it's not a
Yeah.
one size fits all.
Interesting, complete tangent, but just a good talking point. You've probably seen a ton of these, but on YouTube, especially in the booktube community or the authortube, I guess, community, there's a whole bunch of videos on writing routines by famous authors and people trying to, do those writing routines to see how they work for them. And I find those really interesting just because, A, you're learning about a particular writer and what
Yeah,
their writing routine is,
I think it
and then the
was.
failure of that, generally speaking.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've done a lot of digital interviews with authors as well, and asked for their writing routines because a lot of people in this community aspire to be full-time authors and make enough income to be a full-time author, and it's an excellent dream. It's very hard to attain, in my opinion,
Yeah.
just because of the market. It's saturated at the moment, so and that comes down to intent. What are you writing for? Who are you writing for? And that's a whole other conversation there, but. I talking to people and seeing what their routines are and just the discipline behind it is amazing. And I immediately go, that won't work for me. Or, all right, I might give
Yeah.
that a go because in myself I know
Yeah.
that that's a thing. I remember, I think it's Ursula K. Le Guin's has one where it's like, eat breakfast and then in brackets like lots and then she allots time,
Yeah.
and then it's like
Yeah.
past 8 p.m. Don't talk to me. It's not worth it or something like that. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Such a
Yeah.
prolific author as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're a lot of
it's
fun.
interesting to see how different everyone is, and yeah, I think it's something you mentioned there though, like the full time author thing and the aspirations. A lot of, I guess, newer writers, even people that have aspired to be a writer for many years, kind of want to go into it wanting to do full time, be a full time writer, and that is just like. Yes, we'd all love to, but also that's really not a thing. Really, it's rare for that to be a thing, and it takes a lot of luck, a lot of
Yeah,
time.
but it takes a lot of discipline, is what I would put it down to personally. Is do you have the dedication to know that you will not make money on this project or for X amount of years? And when you start
Yeah,
to break even, that's fantastic. And people can do it.
if
I'm
you
not saying you
you start.
can't. Um,
Mm,
Absolutely, you can. You can make a living from it, but there are a lot of factors at play there. Personally, I don't think I would survive as a full-time author because I need the routine. I need the discipline, and I don't like sitting still. So, like, um, yeah, it's not something that I personally see for myself ever. At best, working part-time, writing part-time would be the
yeah,
ideal, but I need
hmm
something else.
yeah. I don't know if I could put my butt in my chair and write for 8 hours. Like, I don't think that would
I
happen, and I don't think that's
procrastinate
how most
so
people do it
much.
either. But yeah, yeah, like it would be so easy. You'd really have to be consistent. But I think, I think from what I've heard anyway, most if you're going to be a full time writer, especially traditional publishing, most of them will do like I don't know their word count per day and do that, and that might take them 2 hours. It might take them 3 hours, maybe half a day, maybe the whole day because the words aren't coming, and then that's that. A lot of them will kind of do that, and once they hit that word count or they get to the point that they need to get to, that's it. So I guess full time author can mean a lot of different things as
Yeah,
well.
and I think there's a misconception out there that a lot of traditionally published authors don't also work on the side
Right.
because they
Yep.
absolutely do. And or they've
hmm
got, there are traditionally published authors who work on the side. Maybe writing is their main source of income, but they also need to supplement that income, and they have families and they're looking after children. Like it's not all cruisy to be a trad pub author. Yes, you do get I guess, that security of having that paycheck, but potentially you're selling your series and you get one paycheck for your series, and then that publishing house now owns it. And whether you get royalties and things like that, I think there's a lot of misconception about how lucrative traditionally publishing is.
Sure. Hmm. Yeah,
There's another
absolutely.
topic at some point.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
I knew it was
That's
coming up.
topic 2 or 3 that we've come up with in this episode. Um,
So I saw you in the notes. You wrote one that we skipped over that I guess is kind of important. One was the storytelling in our childhood. So was there like an author in particular that you that made you want to write, that was kind of inspired you, or what was that for you?
I've enjoyed storytelling for as long as I can remember. My storytelling career started with an episode of Neighbours, which I definitely plagiarized and pillaged. And I was like sick one day at my nana's house watching this special. Like, that's great. That's fantastic storytelling. Chef kiss. And then there was a competition
Neighbours, wow.
at school, a storytelling competition in a library. I don't know, I was like 8. I remember being grade 3 or grade 4, so it was like 8 or 9. And I just word vomited this story, this soap opera plot line, like word for word. It was about doing the 40-hour famine and having to live off barley sugar. And in the episode, Dr. Carl does it, and he suffers
I think
eating
I remember this one.
eating barley sugar. And then I just like word vomited this. I won the competition. I was like, why? Anyway,
Wow.
but I also remember being the media captain in grade 7, and I would go around to different classrooms, and my dad was a teacher in grade 3, and he used to get me to tell stories to his class, and I don't know if he was using that time for his time or whatever, but he'd be like, Kris
Oh,
is
smart.
here, and so I would have to go around to all the classrooms, to all the teachers, and get their little like quote for the week, and there would be, an hour of my Friday where I would go and do that. But yeah, I'd always like make up stories for dad's class, which I'm sure I pillaged from other places, but I can't remember a
Wow.
particular author for me. And even now, I've taken little bits and pieces from a lot of different things. Um, Probably the first time I read Zed for Zachariah and Hatchet, which I've recently talked about on a video of mine where I did like the personal canon tag, and it was this underlying survival instinct, just this human condition that if we are put to the test, we will survive because we absolutely have to. And I think it was just those little bits and pieces that I was picking from multiple authors, and then we had like the animals phase and like the charmed phase and just little bits that I would pick up from there. What about you? Like you've got 5 novels sitting there. What was the inspiration? Like,
Yeah, and I don't think those particular 5 novels. There was no direct connection between that and like my earliest inspiration author, which is John Marsden, the Tomorrow series,
yeah,
Tomorrow When the War Began. Australian author, very prolific Australian author, very notable Australian young adult author. Yeah, look, those books.
I know
Just
you'd keep
my
telling me to
entire
read
childhood
them.
is
I've
those
read the
books.
first one.
You have to, please, you have to. Just I don't know. There's something about those books. You mentioned survival stories just now, and I think there was something to those. I think maybe when we were younger, there was a lot of that. It was a pretty prominent kind of theme, maybe that especially kids are kind of drawn to that, right? But yeah, there was just something about those books. I think partly because of John Marsden's writing style, which was very just it was just like a conversation, and I don't think I'd read anything quite like that before then, because everything else was when you get into like the genre fiction, the speculative fiction, it's very fantastical, or it's very you're in another world or whatever, and the language kind of sometimes shows that as well, and there was just something about these books just being sort of contemporary stories, being narrated by Ellie is the protagonist in the stories, and it was just very much conversation, and the way that he could write characters is just he's just amazing. He still is amazing. So yeah, those books single handedly wanted to. I just wanted to write from those alone.
I'm trying to remember the name of the lass who played Ellie in the movie. I've never seen the movie, but I had such a crush on
Right.
her as a kid. She was in Neighbours as well. I watched a lot of Neighbours as a child, as an adolescent.
Yes, this is becoming
Yeah,
becoming apparent.
yeah. Not all of my stories have been stolen from Neighbours. I apologize. Promise.
No, I didn't watch much of Neighbours. It was mostly Home and Away that was on the TV, and I didn't really watch that either. But it was at least
Inferior,
on. So
inferior soap opera. Although not cancelled and then
don't
rebrought back to life.
Yeah. Oh, and the other one's actually worth a mention. I don't think I've mentioned it here before, but Christopher Pike. I don't know if
I
I don't
know
know if
the
he's still around
name.
even. Yeah, he wrote the last vampire series, young adult series. It's still like even today. I think that's the story series that would hold up. There's a lot of mythology. I was introduced to a lot of mythology, like Indian mythology as well. A lot of mythology themes in those books. I was a young naive kid. I didn't really
Oh
know much
yeah,
about anything, but
I've just
they were
looked it up.
good. They still are good. So yeah, those two series I think for me. But other than that, yeah, it was mostly like sci-fi shows. That was my bread and butter. That's
I
all I
feel
did.
I'm getting more into sci-fi now as a
Oh,
reader.
you are.
Like, not yet.
I
We
can
just
say that.
discussed that. Next year, hopefully next July. But as I've, I guess, learnt my tastes and gotten better at reading, I guess, more advanced stuff, I do tend to now read sci-fi. But I'm often surprised by sci-fi which is written for entertainment's sake that I really enjoy. And one I read last year, no, it was this year, was either The Forgotten Planet or The Forbidden Planet by Brian Wilson, which has a very Tomorrow when the war began vibe to it. And that's what drew me to that story, and that's why I enjoyed it so much, because similar themes to Tomorrow When the War Began, which is interesting. And also, superhero stories, I do not gravitate towards them at all.
No.
But there's been something with that, I guess, that humanity that I've really enjoyed with the Hybrid Helix series by JCM Byrne. I got off on a tangent there because I just like books and I'm thinking about books and reading.
That's all you want to talk about. It's fine.
Yeah,
We can talk about books if you want.
actually, all I talk
Yeah.
about is books. Um, yeah, you reminded me with the Tomorrow When the War Began.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's good to have those like I don't know those big cornerstone books that you think of and it's like that was the book that made me feel this way or inspired me to do this thing or taught me about this thing that I now think about all the time or put into my own work all the time. So yeah, it's good. It's important.
100%. Well, we've done an hour. We have come to the
We have.
we've come to the end of the podcast. Was there anything else that we didn't touch upon?
I don't think so, really. I think once I get back into like that season of writing, for me, we can probably then have a good discussion
Yeah.
about writing and sort of our habits and things like that. But until then, I'd love to hear more. As you start to go through as you have been going through your editing and all of that, taking us along for that journey because that is a journey.
Yeah, I probably will do a YouTube video once it's out on what it looked like for me because I feel like it's different to the narrative that I've heard about or followed or like read about in these interviews and things like that. And then what my habits look like in the future and built it off that and the learnings. Because I think I always appreciate those videos from other authors who are like, I did this thing, here's what I learned from it.
Yeah,
Because, yeah, I don't know, I love that sort of thing.
yeah, they're fascinating.
But that brings us to the end of the podcast for today. So to watch the video replay of the podcast, you can head on over to Genre Blender Podcast on YouTube. The audio versions are available on Apple and Spotify, although I think Spotify now has video from memory as well, but just your podcast app of choice. You'll find all the show notes in the description box down below. For access to book discussions and community first updates, you can consider joining our free tier of Patreon. It is free. We haven't got anything paid on there at this stage. And you can follow us on Genre Blender Podcast on Instagram and TikTok for clips of the show. And if you do so choose, you can visit us on genreblenderpodcast.com for all of those social media links across the web. You can find me, Kris, over at AFictionalEscapist on YouTube and Instagram, and we have Rian at ryan.floyd on Instagram or ryanfloyd.com for everything else.
And to all the world hoppers out there, we wish you safe travels. We'll catch you in the next episode, which will be our end of year book tag, which Kris, who is much more firmly entrenched in the booktube community than I am, has suggested that we do. It seems like a ton of fun actually, so I'm quite looking forward to that. And also potentially a cheeky Christmas gift exchange.
I'm really going to wrap
Question
those.
mark?
Yeah. Yeah.
Same.
Confirmed. Need to
Glad
wrap
I'm not
them.
the only one.
Yeah.
Nice. But till then, take care everyone, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.